Christin Collins. I live in Southern California with my husband Travis. He's right here. And I work for Reinvent Ministries for the past 3 years. I serve on the leadership team. I'm a sponsor in California and moved to Arizona for a year, and we got some Reinvent work going out there. And so I'm happy to be here. I've loved these calls each week with everyone, and I'm excited to share tonight. So thank you for being with me. I'm excited about, we're doing a bit of a difference tonight. Like Kris said, we're going to be doing some breakout groups, and we also have a slide deck for the people who learn better visually. So I'm excited about the differences that we're bringing in tonight. So thank you for being here. Each week, the purpose of these calls, for those of you who have been on it, have been about flourishing in times of uncertainty. So in previous weeks, we talked, actually, Kris, you can go to the next slide. We talked about the value of embracing surrender and acceptance rather than resistance, especially when life is not showing up the way we prefer it to. For a lot of us, that's the way it's showing up right now, right? So if you haven't watched previous weeks, that's okay. Stay with us tonight, but then go back and check out our Reinvent Ministries YouTube channel, because there's a lot on there. And especially this surrender and acceptance idea is the primary orientation of what we're going to be doing tonight, what tonight is built upon. So a couple weeks ago, Kris and I spent an hour on the discipline of meditative breath-based practices. So these daily practices are foundational to jumpstarting us towards surrender and acceptance, right? It's the first key component, this discipline. Kris, you can go ahead and just hit next.
Working on it. There we go.
This discipline is all about rewiring our brains. So when we practice breath-based mindfulness regularly, Kris, what, 10 to 12 minutes a day is real ideal?
Well, yeah, I mean, the more the merrier. But if you're doing it in the morning to really ground yourself and calm yourself and clear the mental chatter and be present in your body and notice, 12 minutes is a great start. So anywhere 12 to, if you're really rambunctious, go 20.
Great, 20. So any amount of time is best, but regular time is the key, right? Because it helps us, when we do this regularly, it helps us to get off the automatic. We'll notice that we are able to stay calm and present in the moment. And a lot of times what opens up when we're calm and present in the moment is options that we see differently that we may not see when we're resisting, right? So that first key step is rewiring our brains to the spiritual disciplines. Next slide, Kris. So mindfulness is not the entire process though, right? So there's 3 other key steps that Kris is going to cover tonight. And he's also going to cover, this is a total Kris word, I love it. It's the secret sauce we need to take this from a head knowledge place into more of a lifestyle. So let's complete these 4 steps, right? First one being the rewiring. And then I'll lead us through some breakout sessions, and we'll all get to create more freedom, joy, and power in our lives. Does that sound good to everyone? I know you're all muted, but you can give me a thumbs up. Okay, so before we get started, let's just take, I think reflection is a primary key in helping us discover what's wanted and needed in our life. So let's just reflect. For those of you who have joined us in past calls, or maybe some of you have been in the LIA and you're already practicing regular breath-based mindfulness.
And plus remember that when we did our session on breath-based mindfulness, we challenged you to practice it over the course of the lockdown and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so those of you who accepted the challenge, go ahead and let's all close our eyes for a minute. And just spend some time reflecting. How has it been doing this practice of breath work in your life? What are you noticing? What are you noticing while you're doing the practice? What are you noticing in your life is happening as a result? For those of you who haven't done it, maybe you can notice why you haven't tried it yet. Are you resisting anything? What has the daily practice of mindfulness brought to your life? Okay, as we always do on these calls, we're going to take some sharing. I would love to hear, for those of you who have tried it, let's hear from a couple people. What have you noticed? Is there anything that feels pertinent to share that you'd like to share with us tonight? Go ahead and take yourself off mute and then just jump right in.
Okay, this is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, hon. I have been doing it, and I love it.
What do you notice about it? What do you love about it?
I always have a lot of chatter in my head, and so therefore it's hard for me to focus. So I've been getting myself to do that, the breathing, and it helps me, to rope my mind back into what I'm focusing on. It's really given me, it's just helping me have more clarity in my head and like kind of stop the spinning.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's great.
And I do it at night sometimes when I can't shut my mind down to go to sleep. I'll do it at night, and that really helps me. So I'm just learning. I feel like I'm learning to bring my brain back to where, where I can focus and on task,
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing, Karen.
Who else? Anybody who's been practicing the meditative breath-based stuff that we covered previously, which is a great way to clear your mind, and it's a process of rewiring.
I'll go.
Okay.
I'm Amanda from Phoenix, Arizona, and I love mindfulness breath work. And the challenge that these calls brought in reminded me how the regular practice of it makes a significant difference. And particularly what I've really enjoyed is the spiritual component, the reminder of the beautiful spiritual practice that you walked us through of breathing in God's affection and love for us and breathing out the things that aren't serving that. And that has been something that I've definitely recalled multiple times over the last couple of weeks. And I have and when I do the mindfulness practice, I am so much more grounded emotionally throughout my day. There's not as many peaks and valleys emotionally. Oh, there's my dog. He came to join the party. So.
Very cool.
Hi, Jingles.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you said, and that what you were referring to, breathing in like God's delight, breathing out anything in the way of it or whatever. That's prayer without words, right? I mean, Scripture even talks about there's prayer with words, prayer without words, and it's an awakening style of prayer that is. It's an embodied form of prayer. I love doing that kind of stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to complete the 4 steps. So let me go back here. So it's what we're doing here is the 4 steps to embrace. So, and the first thing that we got into this topic, we talk about how resistance works, and whenever life doesn't show up the way we prefer, which is almost all the time, we resist it. We're in the middle of this lockdown thing, so that's a huge thing that isn't the way we prefer life to be. So how do I manage this? Because it has an impact. And rather than resist, how do I get to surrender? So we covered that, and then we talked about the foundation, which Christian just very beautifully explained. For all of that is the contemplative spiritual disciplines, which the mindfulness, breath-based awakening prayer and clearing, practicing stillness, silence, solitude. So that is the foundation, but it's not the whole game. So I could become an expert in mindfulness and do mindfulness all the time and have that be a calming and peace-generating element in my life, but it doesn't mean that all the resistance in my life just automatically melts away. That's just not how it works. So I know from just speaking for myself, I can have a terrific time with practicing the spiritual disciplines, the contemplative stuff that we're talking about in the morning, and be very grounded, calm, peace, and then go out into my day and something happens that I think sucks, and then boom, I'm off to the races again with reactivity or defensiveness or getting triggered. And so it lays the foundation, and it is an absolutely critical part. It is the foundation. But then how do we complete the whole process of consistently throughout your day, no matter what happens, to be able to continue to embrace surrender and create freedom and joy and power in your life moment by moment. So that's what we're going to get into. So also, if you look at this middle statement, there's a secret sauce that we're going to cover. So there's a whole process. There's 4 steps to the process. And if you pay attention to all of these, they will lock it down. Now, when people do presentations, sometimes they'll come up with something, well, how can I put this in 3 steps or 4 steps? Because it makes it easy for people to remember. That was not the mindset on this one. It's actually 4 things that are critical. The mindfulness and contemplative prayer that we're just talking about it has a great impact on having you be more present in your body. It really impacts your capacity to regulate your emotions and your capacity to be aware of what's going on for you physiologically, kinesthetically, as well as, instinctually. So, and you really clear your mind when you're doing that prayer. You're not really you're working to just release thoughts. So you're really not engaging the cognitive, and you're not necessarily, that's a form of action, but it's a very receptive form of action. It's not assertive. So there's some assertive elements to renewing the mind. And there's also, which is what creates thorough transformation. So we're going to complete the whole package. And there's actually 3 other things that I've just noticed over the years in observing that, what helps people actually set new trajectories in their life that they can stick with and produce a whole new path of living that's sustainable. So really what we're talking about are what are the 4 things that create this to where it's sustainable. And then we'll talk about a secret sauce that you need to add to make it a lifestyle. So we're going to complete that today. So we already covered that. So covered that. So that's step 1, the mindfulness stuff. So step 2 in this process, in releasing resistance into acceptance or surrender and creating an experience of freedom, joy, and power, is to reframe limiting beliefs. Now, sometimes we ask people to think about what are the internal conversations that you notice you're having? When we ask people that in a training environment, what's the internal conversation you're having? We're asking for them to start looking at those thoughts that they notice that they're having and have them be clues and see, and then be openly wonder and consider and contemplate what is that internal conversation tied to in terms of belief systems. And if it's a limiting internal conversation, for example, I can't do this. If I'm saying that internally to myself, that's an internal conversation. And it's also tied to a belief about the fact that I can't do it. So when you notice that you're tied up in a limiting belief, and when you're resisting life because it's not what you prefer, by definition, that is a limiting conversation because you're resisting it, and your focus of attention and energy are all locked in on what you don't want. So it doesn't create much bandwidth and space in your heart and mind to start thinking about ways to transverse or walk through the challenges that you're facing that's creating the resistance. So a big, big part of that is reframing limiting beliefs to empowering beliefs. So you're in a moment, we're going to put you into meeting rooms, and you're going to get a chance to identify your biggest limiting belief. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, so don't get nervous, all right? You'll come up with something that'll really resonate for you, I promise. Unless you don't, and then we can have a conversation about that. But it's not that difficult. So what do I mean when I say you're going to identify your biggest limiting belief? First off, I'm talking about the biggest limiting belief that you can come up with in the moment as you're considering and contemplating this. Don't worry if it's not the ultimate greatest limiting belief of the entirety of your essence on the planet. Don't just think about it. Think about, what beliefs do I have about myself, about life, about others, about the circumstances of my life? What belief do I have that bites me in the rear all the time, and it keeps me from taking effective action to create the vision that I say I'm up to in my life? So a limiting belief's an assumption or presupposition or belief that you have about yourself, life in general, or your circumstances that's limiting what you see possible. Now, it's not a matter of whether you have those. Guaranteed, you have them, many limiting beliefs. We all do, because survival is our default. That's our autopilot. And survival is about playing it safe. So it's about shrinking. It tends to have us shrink life down to where it's safe and comfortable. And that by definition is limiting, because nothing that's a big challenge that you're going after, that's a risk that requires vulnerability, ever feels safe. So just be thinking about this as I'm talking about it, and think in terms of the most limiting belief that's in your life that comes to mind right now when you're in this sharing meeting room with one other person. Just think about it. And then if you're stuck, you're going to have a couple minutes each to do this. The other person can maybe help coach you to get going. But here's how to get going on this if you're kind of drawing a blank as you think about it. Just start talking about, when it's your turn to share, what comes to mind. Whatever comes to mind, just start talking about that and see, and then that may lead into some more clarity around something that's a big limiting belief for you. Now, a couple of years ago, I did some work on identifying the top three limiting beliefs in my life. And by golly, I came up with them. And I wanted to share with you the first one, just to give you an example of this. So the number one limiting belief in my life, and this didn't take a lot of time for me to figure out. It took like a couple of minutes, 2 minutes or so. I was in a training event, and someone else was doing this exercise, and they just said, you got 2 minutes to come up with it. So my limiting belief is that it's all on me. This is just how I especially if this happens a lot when I'm caught up in resisting the way things are, okay? Then this really shows up. It's all on me. If it's my idea, it's my responsibility to bring it past. Why would anyone else want to get involved if I'm not doing my part? Now, in some ways, you could look at that and say, well, that's kind of resourceful. You're kind of owning what you're up to, and you know that you've got to put effort into it. So most limiting beliefs at times can have some logic to them, but then we over-rely on them, overemphasize them, or don't see in the moment when we're up against some big challenge or some mess, we don't see that that's all we're seeing that's possible. So where this becomes limiting for me is if I get caught up in this, I will not notice the provision of other people or the provision that God in some form or fashion has for you in the moment that is a piece to the puzzle of carrying out whatever it is that I'm trying to work through. So what happens when I get caught up in this is I tend to isolate more. It drains my energy. I feel stuck. I feel it kind of puts me in a malaise. And then I feel like the only thing that I can do is to work my way out of it and work, and just, work, and eventually I'll get it figured out. So what does that produce? Well, it produces exhaustion. It produces frustration. And there's always provision that's God's got for me out there, whether it's another person that I want to enroll in being a part of it with me, or whether it's some learning opportunity that I could avail myself of to help work my way through, whether it's setting the whole thing aside and doing something different for a day. There's a million different ways to engage this. But I'm telling you, when I get stuck in this, I'm unconscious to it, because this is a habitual limiting belief that is in that has been true for me for my entire adult life. So it just happens and I don't even notice I'm caught up in it. That's why I have to stop and think about it. And so when I finally realized that the experience of life I'm having is not what I want, which I described like, exhaustion or stuckness, that kind of thing, then I have to stop and just say, hold on, buckaroo. What's going on that you're missing here, right? So that's the whole thing around what we're talking about. So you're going to have a chance to do that with another person. But first, let me just see here. Okay, one more slide on this. Your limiting beliefs don't have to be your destiny. You can completely transform them. Now, this is one of the steps. The first is the mindfulness, and then start reframing those limiting beliefs. You can't reframe what you're not aware of. So first you have to identify them. And then another thing that's helpful is just consider what's the fear that limiting conversation or that limiting belief is designed to manage. Limiting beliefs are always designed to manage fears. So for me, it's the fear of failure. It's on me. And so when you really think about it, when I say it's on me, if it's up to me to get done, why would anyone else want to try to do this if it's not their idea? In reality, I'm just over relying on myself, which really is vanity when you think about it. It's vain to think that I can pull it all off on my own. So but it's designed to manage a fear of failure. And that fear of failure for me started out of me trying to set part of my winning strategy in life being performing, achieving, being successful, so I wouldn't be rejected. That goes all the way back to when my parents were divorced when I was 6, and then my dad wasn't around, so I would try to be excellent in school and sports, so strong adult figures would want to be with me and invest in me. Of course, all this running completely non-conscious, had no clue. And just over the years, I figured that out. But this being my number one limiting belief, I just figured out a couple years ago. So you're going to have a chance to do that. And Kristin's going to guide you through it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kris. I love what Kris shared. Thanks for sharing that example too, Kris. That was helping me even think through my limiting belief. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout sessions. Before you start reading the question about the breakout session, listen carefully to me, because I'm going to give you some instructions and then we'll give you time to read the question. So in a moment, Kris is going to, Zoom will randomly assign you into a breakout room with one other person. And when he does that, there will be a pop-up that pops up and asks you to confirm that you'd like to enter the breakout room. So you're going to click to join it. So once you and your partner are in the room, you'll notice that you have a 4-minute timer on your screen. So you each are going to have 2 minutes to share, and you're going to manage that time together. So when you come into the room, state your name and the place you live, introduce yourself to the person, and then each of you take 2 minutes and watch that timer on the right-hand side so you know how much time you've got left. It'll count down from 4 to 0.
What about 2 people on the same video? Like Trisha.
Okay, so then you guys, so the 2 of you in the same video, the way that this works, you either automatically assign people with another person and you're like from Zoom world, you're one entity of one, or else you have to personally assign everybody, which we're not going to do. So then you guys just manage your time. You're going to have 4 minutes. So just manage your time so all 3 of you have a chance to go. So it's like, minute and a quarter, minute, 20 seconds each.
Yep. Good question, Terry. I'm going to finish my instructions, and then if anyone has any more questions before we go out into the breakout room, we'll give time for that too. So you'll have a total of 4 minutes together in your breakout session, and then you'll see a pop-up letting you know that you'll be rejoined with the group in 15 seconds. So go ahead and take that 15 seconds. You don't need to jump right back in. It'll automatically kick you back in and wrap it up with your partner and finish your time together. So you're gonna have 4 minutes. You're gonna be automatically assigned. Click to join and head over into that room. You're going to answer the questions that we'll go over in a minute. And anybody have any questions so far? It'll automatically send you back when the 4 minutes is up. Any more questions?
Just unmute if you have a question. Remember to unmute when you go into the breakout room too. Anybody?
So if there's a name down at the bottom of my square, I click that guy's name?
Nope,
No,
you'll
you'll automatically just end up in the room.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Tony.
Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Christin.
Okay. So question you're going to talk about with your partner or partners if you have more than one person with you. What is the biggest limiting belief you have that's producing unwanted or negative consequences currently? So that's one question. And then what negative consequences have you already experienced as a result of this belief? So this is the whole prices. What are the prices you're paying for that limiting belief? Now you're going to have 2 minutes each. So this is not the time to dive into your whole life story with this person. I really want you guys to take the time to try to identify that limiting belief, talk the limiting belief out and try to get to that, that concrete thought. Don't worry if you don't have it, just start saying what comes to mind and things will come to mind automatically for you. Okay? So are we ready?
All right. So I'm going to stop the screen share in order to do this meeting room thing. So be sure you remember these. You're talking about the biggest limiting belief that you have that's producing unwanted negative circumstances. If the whole 2 minutes it takes you to get that, that's okay. But if you have time left after you've identified that, and look, if you're not sure it's the biggest, don't worry about it. Come up with whatever comes to mind for now, because we have all sorts of limiting beliefs. You can use this reframing on all of them. And then think about the negative consequences if you have time left in your 2 minutes. All righty. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and then we're going to go into the rooms.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. If you didn't notice yet, you were automatically muted when you came back in. So we're glad to have you back. And now I'm so curious. I would love to hear from a couple of you. What did you discover? Not what was the breakout session like, but what did you discover about your limiting belief during that time with your partner? Or the consequences, the negative consequences you've noticed in your life because of it. So go ahead and unmute yourself and just jump right in.
I felt there were some limiting beliefs that we had in common, which surprised me.
What was yours, Terry?
So I was talking about in regular life, not work, not believing I have things in common with other people, and just taking myself out of conversations and taking myself out of the moment.
Yeah. And how do you notice that negatively affects your life? What are the consequences of you taking yourself out of the moment?
Not probably. Well, I mean that's notional, but I think not engaging fully in life really has me missing out on so many things that could be great, and then feeling the lack as a result, or
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I love what you shared about the commonality piece too, because my partner and I was with Erica, and Erica and I had really similar limiting beliefs as well. So what? I didn't hear.
Sorry.
Okay, who else would like to share?
I'll go. I realized that that I have this limiting belief around my past always informing my future. So that the fact that my first marriage didn't work out and that I didn't finish school, that I would be continuing to bring that into all of my future relationships or all my future endeavors, and that everything or that my lack of finished formal education would always inform my ability to speak up about things that I care about. And so I realized how much that's held me back from having really good expectations in relationships that I've had, or having higher expectations of what I might be able to stand in or achieve long term. And it's kept me, it's really held me back from making more bold choices about things, because I don't feel like I deserve those things, because I didn't see through, like, with some of my commitments when I was younger.
Yeah, I hear that. So is it, I heard you say your past, it feels like your past is going to be your future. And
Yeah.
it sounds like as you ended there was a little bit of maybe not trusting yourself
Yeah.
to make good decisions, because you're looking at things that you've decided in the past and now wondering, can I trust myself going forward in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Brittany. That was so clear. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
Is Kris here on the call? Do we have him here? I think we lost Kile somehow.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Do we have time for another one, Kris, or would you like to jump back in?
Let's jump back in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, everyone. That was great.
Yeah. So look, I want you to write it down. Write it down, because now we're going to go to the empowering belief. You're going to replace that with, folks, I'm telling you, this works. This works. I ended up getting in a room with my buddy Billy Fitzgibbons, and he was talking about his limiting belief was the eating crappy food. And it reminded me of my number 2 limiting belief I came up with the top 3, which is I can lose weight easily, but then I can't keep it off. It's a belief. Lost the same weight 3-4 times. And then lo and behold, just out of the blue, several months later, so I practiced these, it just hit my mind to lose all the extra weight I had, which I did. And I've kept it off longer than I ever have, ever. And it's been really easy to keep it off. So, and I was really stuck in like a funk, an extended funk up until a couple of weeks ago for about 2 months. And then I went right back to that number 1 limiting belief. And I said, okay, pal, this is number 1 for you. So this has got to be in the mix. And I just reflected on it and I contemplated, and it led me on a path to dig my way out of that. I'm telling you, this works. I take these limiting and empowering beliefs. We're going to create the empowering one next. And I put them in my notes in my phone. So I have the 3 of them, the 3 empowering beliefs, and I already know the limiting ones. And then when I'm feeling stuck, I just go and I read those things off my notes, and it starts getting me tracking on what I need to reframe to get into the kind of mojo I desire to be in that moment. So this stuff is very useful if you record it. So here's what's next. So what's an empowering belief? We're not going to do this in a break room because there's 4 steps. We want to get to the rest of them. But what's an I'm going to give you some time to think about this, and then we're going to take some sharing from some people. What's an empowering belief or conversation you can create to replace that limiting belief or conversation with? So the one about, it's all on me to get it done, that belief, which is my number 1, I replace that with the empowering. God's provision's always there. We just don't see it. I don't see it. So it's like, pay attention to God's provision today. Release the lie that's all on you, that it's all on you. So I'll pay attention to when I remember this, I'll pay attention to the provision that I'm already aware of, that I'm not thinking about, but I'm also just open, like, what provision is there that I'm not even seeing? I don't even know it exists. And perhaps it hasn't even come up yet. So perhaps it's something that's in my life that I'm not even seeing as a provision, a person, whatever. Usually that's people that are provisions for that. So So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you a minute to think about an empowering belief. And that may not be enough for you to perfectly come up, but you'll start on the path and some of you will nail it very quickly. And we'll just be here in silence together for a minute. And I want you to think about what's the empowering belief that comes to mind for you right now that could be a replacement for that limiting belief. So when I notice that belief happening, I'm like, no, I'm going to let that one go and I'm going to focus on this one. And so what you really want to get down for what our purposes are here is at least the beginnings of fleshing out that empowering belief. And this, the simpler, the better. So we're going to take a minute and I'll time it and I'll let you know when we're done. So work on that. Okay, here we go. 1 minute. All right, if you can, we're going to reconvene here. That's a minute. Who would like to share what you came up with for your empowering belief? So how I want you to do this is just tell us straight up your limiting belief you came up with. You don't need to explain it or anything. And then tell us the empowering belief that you've come up with to replace that limiting belief with when you notice it coming up for you. Who'd like to share?
I could share. I'm Steve from Connecticut, and my limiting belief was that I thought people were just waiting to criticize or form a judgment about me and just confront me with it. And so I'd have to be a perfectionist to prevent that from happening. And the overcoming, empowering belief is that God has a plan and a future for me, and He loves me as I am.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, you've got to get the cognitive thought in your head if it's ever going to get to your heart, right? Starts in the brain and the rational mind. And then as we just allow it to seep in, it starts seeping into our heart and moving towards the category of actual belief. Who else?
This is Laura in Rhode Island.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Hey. The limiting belief was I won't be able to bear my disappointment if something I'm really excited about isn't received well. The empowering belief is God is always interested in what excites me, and He's provided the tools and the people that will help me navigate disappointment if people aren't excited with me.
All right. Thank you. That's great.
I like that, Laura. Like resource will be there for you to help you bear your disappointment when you need it. Yeah. So you can just go for it.
Yeah.
One more person. Who else would like to share?
I guess I'll go.
Okay. Hi, Greg.
Hey. So my limiting belief is that I have potential to do just about anything, but I don't for whatever reason. And that, I don't know, I'm looked down on for that, or I look down on myself for that. And the empowering belief is I'm able. That's it.
Awesome. Cool. Short and sweet. That's good. Those are easy to remember. So if any of you didn't quite get it fully fleshed out, if you just spend some reflection time, you'll get it completed. And these could be reminders because the default isn't going away. The limiting belief is the default. So you have to get present. That's why the mindfulness is so helpful. It helps us presence ourselves so then we can notice what's going on we weren't noticing. We can identify the limiting internal conversations, which leads to the limiting beliefs, and then we can reframe them to an empowering one. So that's step 2. then step 3 is to notice and remind yourself of the impact your limiting belief is having on those around you. You know, we're called to love. I mean, the greatest commandment is to love God and love your neighbors yourself. So that really, all of this is for naught if it's just for me to just have a good time with myself, all right? And there's nothing wrong with having a good time with yourself. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more fun to walk this out to where it impacts others. And when I'm caught up in my limiting beliefs, and when I'm caught up in resistance, and when I'm in a malaise or resignation, or whatever it is, around just, you know, being in a funk, that impacts people around me. But we normally, it doesn't dawn on us all the time that they're paying a price for that also. So the next step, which is huge, is to notice and remind yourself of the impact your limiting belief is having on those around you. So it's real simple. Just ask yourself, what's the impact this experience of living is having? So what's the price others are paying? Then really dial into what's going on for them, not on your interpretation of what's going on for them. You remember, you know how that works, right? Well, you just need to get over that because, you know, I'm in a tough spot here. So that's me interpreting what's going on for them rather than just allowing it to penetrate me. Empathy is the door to becoming aware. So here's a simple little path. If you don't feel like just connecting to what's going on from someone else when you're having a negative impact on them because of your own limiting beliefs, this is a simple thing. Just notice it, be with it, allow it to pierce you that the way you're being with them isn't what you aspire to. You don't judge yourself. You don't get down on yourself. You just allow it to absorb in. That's sometimes called compunction. And then actually have some sorrow over missing the mark with your aspiration to love others in that situation in a way that's rich and works for them. That's sometimes called contrition. And then that enables you to think about, well, what's the posture of the heart? What's the iniquity in the heart? The entitlement, the resentment, the anger, the disappointment, the withdrawal, whatever it is, what's the posture of my heart that needs to shift? So if I'm resentful, if I shift that posture of the heart to gratitude, it'll open up an opening for me to be with people in a way that impacts them with love more effectively. In ancient Christianity, that was called conversion. And then this is the biggie. This is the one everybody leaves out. They're good about, tearfully, apologizing and reconnecting and will you please forgive me and yada, 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 yada. And then they go right back to doing the same darn thing like an hour later or a day later or 2 days later. So if you do this with the desire of changing the trajectory, turning around, affecting a change in your action. So this is all designed to clear the space to go again, but it's designed also, and this is called repentance in Scripture, it's designed to walk down that path towards them, which leads us to step 4. And we're going to do this in a minute. Step 4 is to renew your commitment to act now. So you can say, yes, I'm going to change my trajectory, but that requires a commitment because we have to get outside of our own selfishness, our own stuff. And so you break through your resistance by renewing, like we say, we want to be people of action. We want to live transformationally. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that and renew our commitment to act on it now. How many times have you done some work and you just feel like, I've done enough. I don't want to have to actually walk this out. But if we don't walk it out, it doesn't create the impact that we want it to. Because, contemplation is important, but it needs to be married to action in order to create effective results. So you renew your commitment to act now. You engage your will. Your will comes from your heart, from the core of your being, and that's where commitment is birthed. Where there's a will, there's a way. It's all about your commitment to act now. So, when I really got clear on I can lose weight, but I can't keep it off. And then I decided I was going to, go again. Then I took immediate action, and that really helped because I didn't give myself a chance to back out of it. And by acting now, it got me in motion towards that possibility. And I was in the game versus just thinking about being in the game. Commitments, the definition we use in the trainings, it's the stuff character is made of. It's the power to change the face of things, and commitment to action is a huge commitment. And it's a daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. So the question is, when are you going to act to transform the impact that you're producing? What are the results that you're committed to? So what I'd like for you to do is, I'd like for you to think about this, and I'm going to give you another minute to just think about it. And what I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is just to share, anybody who wants to, what you're noticing about the prices others in your life are paying as a result of this limiting conversation that you're engaging, okay? So everybody will have a minute. Who in your life is paying the price, and what's the price they're paying? How is this impacting this? Bring it home to someone specific in your life that your limiting conversation that you came up with is having an impact on. It's having an impact on you, obviously, and who else? So you have 1 minute. Okay, if you can wrap that up. Who'd like to share what you noticed as you were reflecting on that? What did you notice in terms of the impact this is having on those around you that you care about?
Okay, this is Karen in Orange.
Hey, Karen.
Hi, hon.
Hi.
Okay, so mine was about a relationship with my adult children and them wanting them to accept me for who I am. And so I think that how it's affecting them is instead, it's like I think I pre-think everything they're thinking instead of trusting and knowing that my children love me. I think that I affect them because I'm always second guessing what it is that they're saying or what they mean when things are directed towards me. So I don't know if I'm answering this right.
Oh, yeah.
That is what and so I realized that I'm my own worst enemy.
Yeah, it's this is really true when you think about it with friends, family, people in the workplace. Sometimes we're just not in touch with what our impact is. If you're not, you can ask people. Mm-hmm. One other person who'd like to share briefly.
Well, I was going to share.
Okay, go ahead.
Lori from Texas. And
Hi, Lori.
I was going to share that I have this fear of this this coronavirus, this COVID thing, and my children are adults. They're in their 30, and so he got the COVID virus, and he's doing fine. But I notice how it interrupts our relationship, and that I worry about it for us because we're older, and how do I it messes up our relationship because I don't know how to kind of respond to him in a normal way, because it's like, okay, we can't talk, we can't do anything. So I'm affecting all that by my fear, and I don't like that.
Why can't you talk?
Well, because I'm afraid I'll get it, or I'm afraid to be too close to him, or, it kind of like feels like, he's got leprosy.
All right. So I get that. So then you could probably co-create with him something that would work, that keeps proper social distancing and all that. And that ties back to your limiting belief, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So if we have more time, we could drill down, but we only do these, for an hour. That's a great one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lori. I'm sorry to hear that someone in your family's been affected by this virus. I think, too, another thing that might be good is to spend some time really wondering what his experience might be, to notice you keeping yourself at a distance from him, and really let that pierce you. I can hear the sorrow already in your voice about it. But just letting that pierce you, and then from that place, ask yourself what's wanted and needed, what resources are needed that I can shift in this limiting belief and co-create something, like Kris said, with him.
Yeah.
Thank you
you
for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, so those are the 4 steps. And when we send the email out tomorrow with the link to this, we'll have a link to this PowerPoint also, so you'll have it available. So here's the secret sauce to keep it going. So you can go through this process a few times and see how it works, and then it can fade away. But there's a process that you can build into your life that you'll do this, it'll become a sustainable, practicable thing that you can remember, and that will keep it going. So you'll have a more continual experience of freedom or joy or power, regardless of what's going on. So here are the ingredients to the secret sauce. So no matter how we try, we're going to miss the mark sometimes. So how do we stay in the game, not give up? First, consistently, sort of the neon sign that wakes us up, we need to pay attention to something, is we're having an experience of living that doesn't align with what we want. That's when we start getting off of autopilot. Get mindful, do breath work, get in touch with what's going on, and start thinking about what are the internal conversations, go through this whole process. So then, we go through that and we're going along and we bump along, and all of a sudden we're kind of in the ditch again. So you have to investigate your current reality as you're in motion. Self-observe and self-reflect. Notice feedback you're getting just in life or from others. Be open, be curious, be patient, be caring. Notice what's happening. Really just start paying attention, because we don't pay attention to things. What's working, what's not working. This is all neutrally, non-judgmentally, patiently. And then you'll notice some things that you could shift and try again. So that's a recalibration. And then you go again with what you've seen as a step forward, because you stopped and looked at it and you devise a step forward. Who knows if that's going to work? If it doesn't, you go back. You observe what you produced and you go again and recalibrate. And then throughout that whole process, just rejoice over the beauty of what you're creating. You get to stay in the game. You never are stuck with this process. Never. You can always embrace the current reality, self-observe, self-reflect, look for feedback, be curious, be open, notice what's working, what's not, recalibrate, go again. And even if it still looks like a hot mess, you just keep working through it that way. Some things take years and years just doing this process. And some things it goes like that. So you'll be on the path and embracing freedom and exercising power for good. So just to recap, the first thing on the 4 steps to embracing surrender and creating freedom and joy, power and joy, is to rewire through the contemplative spiritual disciplines, silence, solitude, practicing stillness, awakening prayer, prayer without words. Reframe your limiting beliefs into an empowering beliefs. Remind yourself of the impact that you're producing. Notice it and remind yourself of it, that others are impacted by my life. And renew your commitment to act with commitment. Then the secret sauce, notice the results you're producing, recalibrate in preparation of going again. Then repeat the whole process, the 4 steps. And just rejoice that you're in the game. You're working it out. Be patient with yourself. So it's rewire, reframe, remind, renew, get the results, notice what they are. Then if you're still working it, recalibrate, repeat, rejoice. And it just gives you an opportunity to create continuous new beginnings. And this really works, folks. So I want to encourage you to try it out and shoot us an email if you do it. And you get to share.
And Kris, if someone wanted some notes from tonight's call, could they get some of these slides from you?
They'll get them all. You get a link to the whole PowerPoint. So when you get the email tomorrow, you'll get a link to this recording, and then you'll also get a link to the PowerPoint, independent from the video. Okay.
Also, we have recaps on our Instagram stories. If you guys aren't following us on Instagram yet, you can see recaps every week there too.
So in closing, Ennio is going to share with us a special event that we have coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so before I do that, I want to ask, your indulgence and forgiveness. We're about 4 minutes over already, and I'm requesting one more moment because we're very excited about something. And by the way, Kris, I just wanted to say, with all these RE words, this is all under the big umbrella of reinventing your life. So I just want to say that as well. So,
Anya.
We're very excited. May 14th, Thursday night, at the same time as these calls, we are going to have a very special event. In fact, the save the date went out today. And it's really under the category of the next generation. There's many reasons we've titled it this. Number one is just because of the reality of the time of the age that Kris and I are at, and we want to hand this off. And the other thing is how excited, nothing makes more excited than when I go to these trainings and I see so many young people that are just relishing in this type of work. They feel it's really authentic, really raw. They can really just engage it, and I'm very excited that we can have an influence on this. So this next generation event that we're going to have is a fundraiser, but there's going to be a whole context about it. There's going to be live auction items. There's going to be fun and games that we'll be doing together. You'll hear from some stories about what kind of difference this work is making. I know you've all experienced it yourself, but it's really, I think, invaluable to hear from other people. And there'll be raffle prizes, silent auction. And we are doing a fundraiser for several reasons. Number one, the COVID thing has affected us as well. But we need to get some resources in place for the next generation. You've all met, those of you who've been on the calls have met both Brandon and Taylor. We're bringing them up as trainers, and they're both very young, so they can keep it going for a long time. And so we're very excited about that. And just to talk to you about the difference that this work is making for the next generation. And so, as you shared at the end there, Laura, you're talking about the challenge you have with the kids and stuff like that. And believe it or not, none of us ever arrive. I have my own with my own children, and it's very important. And so, to support the next generation is key. I think about legacy that I want to leave, and so we'd like you to hear about that, have some fun with us, and I think you'll be inspired. So that's it, and it'll be, so please open your email that you got today, the save the date, and it has information. It's at the same time, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in, it's at the same time. It's 1 hour long, and then you'll be getting some follow-up emails, some invitation, and more explanation. That's it.
So that's 2 weeks. Next week, we'll have our next call. Like this, Thursday calls like we've been doing, and it's Ennio and Brandon next week. So thank you so much. Great to see you all. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.